Have you thought about moving into a nursing home? My son asked, slicing into his steak. I nodded. The next morning, I flew first class to Barbados and sold the house while they were still chewing. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there for months, maybe years. Daniel, my eldest, had been visiting more frequently, bringing his wife for Sunday dinners. Sophia suddenly remembered her mother's birthday after forgetting it for 3 years straight. And Marcus, my youngest, the peacemaker, had been calling daily to check in. That evening at Bellini's, my favorite restaurant, they were all so attentive. Daniel pulled out my chair, Sophia complimented my pearl earrings, and Marcus kept refilling my water glass. Family dinner with my 3 children. It should have felt warm, comforting. Instead, it felt like a trap. Mom, we've been talking, Daniel said, cutting precisely into his $60 filet mignon that I was paying for. About your future. I noticed how they exchanged glances, synchronized, rehearsed. Your house is too big for just you, Sophia added, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she reached for her wine. All those stairs, the maintenance. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. We worry about you, Mom, Marcus said, his voice gentle. Always the mediator. You're not getting any younger. I took a small bite of my salmon, chewing slowly. I'm 70, not 100. I still swim 3 times a week. I drive. I manage my own finances, though they don't know how well. Have you thought about moving into a nursing home? Daniel finally asked, slicing into his steak. I nodded, watching relief flash across their faces. They thought I was surrendering. They had no idea what I had found on Marcus's iPad earlier that day, when he'd asked me to look at photos from his recent vacation. The email was still open in another tab. Dad's stock portfolio is worth more than we thought. If we can get Mom to agree to assisted living, we can liquidate everything within 6 months. Crestview Developers is already interested in the property. I excused myself to the restroom, where I leaned against the marble sink staring at my reflection. My hands didn't shake. My eyes were clear. What I felt wasn't heartbreak. It was fury, cold and clarifying. James, my husband of 45 years, had died 16 months ago. Heart attack on the golf course, quick and unexpected. He left me. Financially secure. Our home in Westlake Hills, investment properties, stock portfolios. We'd built it all together, brick by brick, over decades, and now my children were dividing the spoils while I was still breathing. We just want what's best for you, Mom, Sophia said when I returned to the table. Her smile practiced, the same smile she'd used when asking for money for her 3rd cosmetic procedure. I know you do, sweetheart. I smiled back, signing the check for dinner. I'll think about it. Later that night, I called my old friend Irene. We'd met in college, stayed friends through marriages, children, and now widowhood. Unlike me, Irene had dealt with family betrayal years ago. Her brother had tried to seize control of their family business while she grieved her husband. Come stay with me in Barbados, she said. Take some time to think, away from them. I was on a plane the next morning. From my beachfront balcony on the west coast of Barbados, I called my lawyer, Richard, who had helped James and me plan our estate. They have no legal right to force you into any facility, he assured me after I explained the situation. But if they're planning something, we should act quickly. I want to sell the house, I said, watching the Caribbean waves crash against the shore. And I don't want them to know until it's done. Evelyn, are you sure? I thought about the house where I'd raised my children, the kitchen where I'd taught them to bake cookies, the yard where we'd celebrated birthdays and graduations. The memories were still there, but now poisoned by their betrayal, I'm sure. Within a week, the house was listed with a discreet realtor who specialized in quick private sales. Within 2 weeks, I had an offer from a tech executive relocating from California, full asking price, cash, with a confidentiality agreement that kept the sale quiet until closing. I signed the papers electronically from Irene's villa, watching hummingbirds dart among tropical flowers. With each document, I felt lighter. I wasn't just selling a house, I was cutting the strings my children were trying to use to puppeteer me. Richard helped me set up new accounts my children couldn't access and transfer my assets. I had always been more financially savvy than my children realized. James had insisted we both understand every investment, every property. Never be at someone else's mercy with your money, Evie. he'd said. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from my children. Daniel, Mom, we found a great place for you to look at. Very upscale, with a pool and activities. Sophia, can we come over tomorrow to discuss the nursing home options? Marcus, Mom, please call back. We're worried about you. I sent brief replies. Taking a little vacation. We'll be in touch soon. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know I could see their panic building as they realized they couldn't move forward with their plans without me. 2 days after the house closing, Daniel called, his voice tight. Mom, when are you coming home? We've been stopping by, but you're never there. I needed some time away to think about the nursing home idea. Well, we need to talk about it as a family. Soon. I closed my eyes, feeling the warm Caribbean breeze on my face. Yes, we do. What my children didn't understand was that while they were mapping out my diminished future, I was creating a new one where I reclaimed my power and set the terms for our relationship going forward. I may have nodded at dinner that night, but I was done being served up as the main course in their feast of greed. While my children believed I was considering my options, I was building a new life in Barbados. The betrayal still stung, but the ocean air was cleansing. Each morning, I walked along the beach at sunrise, my feet sinking into wet sand as waves erased my footprints, much like I was erasing the hold my children thought they had on me. Irene and I sat on her veranda one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Unlike me, she had confronted her brother's betrayal immediately. I regretted it, she admitted, swirling her iced tea. It became ugly, public. I won, but at what cost? We haven't spoken in 15 years. I wondered if reconciliation with my children would be possible. Did I even want it? It's different with children, I said finally. You raise them, love them, sacrifice for them. You don't expect them to be plotting your containment? Irene's eyes were kind but unflinching. People disappoint us, Evelyn. The question is what you do next. What I did next was methodical. With Richard's help, I began examining every aspect of my finances. What I found disturbed me deeply. Someone had been accessing my investment accounts. Small transfers at first, almost negligible. Then larger ones. The IP address traced back to Marcus's home. My hands trembled as I read through the transaction. History, my youngest, my most trusted child, had been stealing from me for over a year, nearly $30,000 gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced Irene's guest room, rage and grief taking turns washing over me. How long had they been planning? This? Was any of their concern genuine, or was it all a calculated performance? I pulled out old photo albums I'd brought with me. Birthday parties, graduations, weddings, my children smiling beside me in all of them. Had they been wearing masks even? Then, Daniel had always been ambitious, sometimes ruthlessly so. Sophia lived beyond her means, accumulating debt with designer labels. But Marcus, I'd thought Marcus was different. My phone buzzed with another text from him. Mom, please let us know you're okay. We're worried. I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. The next morning, I called Richard again. I need every property, every account, every investment transferred and secured immediately. And I want to press charges against Marcus for the stolen funds. Richard's voice was concerned. Are you certain about pressing charges? That's your son. I'm aware of who he is. I replied, my voice steady. That's precisely why I'm doing it. By the end of the week, every asset was secured. My investment portfolio, larger than my children realized, was transferred to new accounts they couldn't access. The rental properties were now under a trust that only I controlled. Richard also sent me something else. Screenshots of emails between my children, retrieved by his firm's digital forensics team. Messages that confirmed everything I suspected and worse. Sophia, do you think she'd notice if we sold the vacation cabin before she signs the POA? Daniel, let's focus on getting her declared incompetent first. My friend at Shady Pines says they can help expedite the process. Marcus, I've been moving money gradually. She never checks the accounts anyway. Each word was a knife, but I refused to bleed. Instead, I let the pain crystallize into resolve. I called Daniel that afternoon. Mom! Finally! Where are you? His voice was sharp with irritation barely masked. As concern, I'm taking some time for myself. I've been thinking about what you all said, about the nursing home. I could almost hear his smile. That's great, Mom. We found some wonderful options. I'm sure you have. I'd like to discuss everything. Can you organize a family dinner next Friday? At the house? Of course, he said, eagerness evident. We'll be there. Should we bring anything? Just yourselves, I replied. I'll take care of everything else. After hanging up, I booked my flight back to the States. Not because I was ready to return to my old life, but because I needed to end it properly. The week before the dinner, I stayed at a hotel rather than the house that was no longer mine. I drove by once, seeing the sold sign already posted but covered with a pending overlay for appearances. The new owners would take possession next month. I visited my safety deposit box, retrieving items I'd stored years ago, documents, jewelry, the letters James and I had written each other while dating. Material things weren't important, but memories were. On Friday afternoon, I entered my former home one last time, key in hand. Empty rooms echoed with my footsteps. I'd arranged for most of the furniture to be sold with the house, but kept personal items in storage. I prepared the dining room table with the fine china we'd used only for special occasions, placed fresh flowers in the center, arranged for place settings, one for each of my children and one for me. No food, no wine. Just empty plates and glasses waiting to be filled. By the time the doorbell rang at 6:30, I was seated at the head of the table, dressed in a blue silk dress I'd bought in Barbados, my hair freshly styled, makeup perfect. I looked prosperous, healthy, and in complete control. Everything they needed me not to be. Come in, I called. The doors open. My 3 children entered the dining room together, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern as they took in the empty table. No food, no welcoming aroma from the kitchen, just clean china on white tablecloths and me. Mom, Sophia spoke first, her voice hesitant. Are we early for dinner? No, I replied, gesturing to the chairs. You're right on time. Please sit. They exchanged glances, that silent communication they thought I never noticed, before taking their usual seats. Daniel at the opposite end, Sophia and Marcus on either side. Where have you been? Daniel asked, his authoritative tone poorly disguising his irritation. We've been worried sick. Barbados, I said simply. Lovely this time of year. Sophia's eyebrows rose. Barbados? By yourself? Mom, that's exactly why we're concerned. You're making impulsive decisions. Like stealing from my accounts, Marcus? I turned to my youngest, whose face instantly drained of color. Was that an impulsive decision, or did you plan it? The room fell silent. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. I don't know what you're talking about. I reached into the folder beside me and slid bank statements across the table. 29,150 over 14 months. Small withdrawals at first, then larger. Ones. All traced to your IP address. Daniel straightened, instantly shifting to damage control. Mom, there must be some misunderstanding. Marcus wouldn't stop. My voice was soft but firm. The performance is over. I know everything. I placed another document on the table, printouts of their emails to each other. Daniel's face hardened. Sophia's hand flew to her throat. Marcus looked like he might be sick. You went through our emails? Sophia's voice trembled with indignation. That's invasion of privacy. I almost laughed. Says the woman who planned to have her mother declared incompetent to gain control of her assets. Daniel leaned forward, hands clasped in front of him, his negotiation posture. Listen, Mom, I know this looks bad, but we were concerned about your mental state. After Dad died, I grieved. I didn't lose my mind. I met his gaze steadily. I've been taking care of myself and my finances for 50 years. Your father made sure I knew every detail of our investments. We just wanted to protect you. Marcus tried, his voice small. From what? Independence? Dignity? I shook my head. No. You wanted to protect yourselves. Daniel's campaign needs funding. Sophia's underwater on her mortgage. And you, Marcus, what was it? Gambling debts? Bad investments? Their silence confirmed everything. So, I continued, you decided the solution was to push me into a nursing home, sell my properties, and divide the proceeds. That's not fair, Sophia protested, tears welling. In her eyes, she'd always been able to cry on command. We love you. We were trying to find the best solution for everyone. The best solution, I repeated. Like selling the vacation cabin before I even signed a power of attorney? More uneasy glances. Daniel, ever the politician, tried again. Mom, we can explain. Everything. Yes, we discussed options that maybe crossed some lines, but nothing was actually done. $29,150 from my account says otherwise. Marcus stared at his empty plate. I was going to pay it back. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. These adults before me. I had once held them as infants, kissed scraped knees, celebrated their achievements. Now they sat plotting my diminishment, seeing me as nothing more than an obstacle to their inheritance. I have something to tell you, I finally said. I sold the house. 3 heads snapped up simultaneously. You what? Daniel's voice rose. Sold the house. I enunciated each word clearly. Closing was 2 weeks ago. The new owners take possession next month. Sophia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. You can't. This is our family home. You didn't even discuss it with us. Like you discussed putting me in a nursing home? Where will you live? Marcus asked, looking genuinely confused. I've purchased a villa in Barbados. Beachfront. Very peaceful. Daniel's face flushed dark red. This is ridiculous. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. I interrupted. The rental properties have been transferred to a trust that only I control. My investment portfolio has been moved to new accounts. And Marcus, I turned to my youngest, the police have been notified about the theft. The blood drained from his face. You're pressing charges? Against your own son? Actions have consequences, I said quietly. Something I apparently failed to teach you. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You can't do this. We're your children. Yes, I said, remaining seated. You are, which makes your betrayal all the more painful. Sophia was openly crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. What about us? What about our inheritance? I looked at her, this daughter who had never learned to stand on her own. You're all in your 40s, successful careers at least on paper. If you haven't secured your futures by now, that's not my responsibility. So that's it? Daniel demanded. You're cutting us off completely? I took a deep breath. Despite everything, these were still my children. The babies I had nursed, the toddlers whose hands I had held, the teenagers whose hearts I had tried to guide. No, I said finally, I'm setting boundaries, something I should have done years ago. I stood up, smoothing my dress. I'll be in Barbados. When you're ready to have a relationship based on love rather than what you can get from me, you know where to find me. They didn't let me leave easily. As I walked toward the front door, Sophia blocked my path, tears still streaming down her face. Mom, please, she begged. You can't just walk away from your family. I'm not walking away from my family, I replied evenly. I'm walking away from people who were planning to strip me of my autonomy. Daniel was on his phone, pacing the living room. I heard snippets of his conversation, lawyer and mental competency and mother's erratic behavior. Even now, they were scrambling to regain control. Marcus approached me, his eyes red. I never meant to hurt you, he whispered. Things got out of hand, and I didn't know how to stop. I studied his face, searching for the little boy who had once followed me around the garden, asking the name of every flower. Was he still in there somewhere? Marcus, I said softly, you had a choice every time you transferred money from my accounts. You chose wrong, repeatedly. His shoulders slumped. What happens now? With the police report? That depends on you, I replied. If you cooperate fully, pay back every cent, and agree to my terms going forward, I may ask for leniency. Desperation flashed across his face. I don't have that kind of money right now. Then I suggest you find it. I turned to leave again, but Daniel blocked the door, phone still in hand, his face flushed with anger. You need to listen to reason, he said, voice hard. You're clearly not in your right mind. Flying off to Barbados, selling the house without consulting anyone. Move out of my way, Daniel. No. He crossed his arms. Not until you agree to see a doctor. We're concerned about your mental state. I looked at my eldest son, this stranger, wearing a familiar face. Are you planning to hold me prisoner in my own home? The home I've already sold? It's for your own good, he insisted. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I'm going to call 911 and report that I'm being held against my will. Or you can step aside now. His eyes narrowed, calculating the optics of police responding to his mother's call. Daniel had always been obsessed with appearances. Finally, he stepped aside. This isn't over, he warned. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. I walked out the front door without looking back. got into my rental car, and drove away from the house where I'd raised my family, hosted holiday dinners, celebrated milestones, and mourned my husband. I felt a momentary pang, not for the house itself, but for the memories it contained. But memories travel. They weren't trapped in those walls. Back at my hotel, I found 3 voicemails waiting, one from each child. Daniel's was coldly professional. "Mom, I've spoken with our family attorney. Your behavior is concerning. We need to discuss next steps before this gets out of hand." Sophia's was tearful. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you, please call me back." Marcus's was quiet, halting. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. Please don't go through with the police report. I'll find a way to pay you. Back, I swear." I deleted them all and called Irene. "How did it go?" she asked. "About as expected," I replied, kicking off my shoes and sinking onto the hotel bed. "They're angry, shocked, still trying to control the situation. And how are you?" I considered the question. There was grief, certainly, but also something unexpected. Relief. Relief at having everything in the open. Relief at setting boundaries. Relief at reclaiming my life. "I'm okay," I said, surprised to find it was true. "Better than okay, actually." "Good," said Irene. "Because the real work is just beginning." She was right. Over the next week, I worked methodically with Richard to ensure everything was legally secure. We updated my will, removing my children as primary beneficiaries and instead directing my estate to various charities with small provisions for them that were contingent on specific behavioral conditions. I contacted the police detective handling Marcus's case, explaining that I was willing to consider a restorative justice approach if Marcus cooperated fully. The detective was skeptical, but agreed to consider it. Meanwhile, my children escalated their efforts. Daniel filed a petition questioning my mental competency. Sophia called distant relatives, spinning tales of my breakdown following their father's death. Marcus alternated between desperate apologies and veiled suggestions that he might harm himself if I proceeded with charges. Every manipulation tactic they'd ever used on me, now deployed in full force. But I was no longer susceptible. Each attempt only reinforced my resolve and confirmed that I'd made the right decision. Richard called with updates from his investigative team. "We found more," he said grimly. "Marcus wasn't just taking money from your personal accounts. He was siphoning funds from the family foundation as well. The foundation James and I had established to provide scholarships for first-generation college students, the one Marcus had volunteered to help manage after James died." "How much?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "Nearly $200,000 over 2 years. He covered his tracks well, but not well enough." I sank into a chair, stunned. The betrayal was even deeper than I'd imagined. "And there's more," Richard continued. "We found emails between Daniel and a developer named Westbrook. They've been discussing plans for your property for months. Apparently, Daniel promised he could deliver the land once you were no longer in the picture." "No longer in the picture," I repeated, the words like ice in my veins. "What exactly does that mean?" "It's vague," Richard admitted. "Could be referring to the nursing home plan. Or something worse." I finished the thought he wouldn't articulate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my hotel room, my mind racing. How had it come to this? Where had I gone wrong as a mother? Or were my children simply consumed by greed, viewing me as an obstacle to the wealth they believed was rightfully theirs? By morning, I knew what I needed to do. I wasn't just fighting for my autonomy or my assets. I was fighting for justice, for myself, for James's memory, and for the principles we had tried to instill in our children. I called Richard. "I want a full investigation," I said. "No holding back. Whatever they've done, I want to know everything." It was time to uncover the full depth of the betrayal. The investigation revealed uglier truths than I was prepared for. Richard's team compiled a detailed report that felt like reading a novel about strangers, not my own children. Daniel, whose political ambitions had always driven him, was drowning, in debt from his last failed campaign. He'd mortgaged his house twice and maxed out credit cards. The developer he'd been communicating with, Westbrook Properties, had made veiled promises of a lucrative position once the family property situation was resolved. Sophia's financial troubles stemmed from her divorce 2 years earlier. Her ex-husband had left her with massive debt from their lavish lifestyle, and she'd been hiding the truth from everyone, maintaining appearances while barely staying afloat. But Marcus's betrayal cut deepest. My youngest, my sensitive one, had a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control. He'd started with the small withdrawals from my accounts as a desperate measure, then moved on to the foundation when those funds weren't enough. There were also concerning texts between him and his siblings discussing medication that could make me more compliant and less aware. I sat in my hotel room, the report spread before me, feeling hollow. These were my children. I had carried them, birthed them, nurtured them. How had they become these people I no longer recognized? A knock at my door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I approached and looked through the peephole. It was Irene. "Surprise," she said when I opened the door. "I thought you might need a friend right now." We embraced, and I felt tears I'd been holding back finally release. She held me while I cried. For my children, for James, for the family I thought we were. "I read the report," she said softly, once I'd calmed. "They sent me a copy with your permission." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "It's worse than I imagined." "Yes," she agreed, not offering false comfort. "But now you know exactly what you're dealing with." We ordered room service and opened a bottle of wine. As the evening wore on, my grief began to transform into something more constructive, a plan. "They're still operating under the assumption that they can manipulate me," I said, sipping my wine. "That if they push the right buttons, guilt, obligation, fear, I'll eventually give in." Irene nodded. "That's how it's always worked before." "Not anymore." I set down my glass. "It's time to be strategic. They want to play chess? Fine. But I'm not going to be their pawn." The next morning, I called Richard with clear instructions. "I want a meeting set up. All 3 of my children, you, me, and a forensic accountant. Neutral ground, your conference room." "Are you sure that's wise?" he asked. "Daniel's petition about your competency is still pending." "I'm counting on that," I replied. "Schedule it for next Monday. And Richard, make sure everything is recorded." While Richard arranged the meeting, I worked on another front. I contacted Detective Rivera, handling Marcus's case, and requested a private meeting. We met at a quiet cafe near the police station. Rivera was a serious woman in her 50s with keen eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Harrington," she said after we'd ordered coffee, "I've reviewed your case thoroughly. The evidence against your son is substantial." "I'm aware," I replied, "but I'd like to discuss alternatives to criminal prosecution." She raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why? Family loyalty?" "No," I said firmly. "Strategic consideration. I believe there's a way to serve justice while achieving more meaningful outcomes." I outlined my proposal. A deferred prosecution agreement that would require Marcus to enter treatment for gambling addiction, make full restitution to both me and the foundation, perform community service, and most importantly, cooperate fully with the investigation into his siblings' activities. "You're offering him a deal to testify against his brother and sister?" Rivera clarified. "I'm offering him a path to redemption," I corrected. "Whether he takes it is his choice." Detective Rivera studied me for a long moment. "You know, most victims in family fraud cases either want blood or want to sweep everything under the rug. Your approach is unusual." "My children made their choices," I said quietly. "Now I'm making mine." After she left, I sat alone, watching people pass by the cafe window. Young mothers with strollers, business people hurrying to meetings, an elderly couple holding hands as they slowly walked by. James and I should have been that couple. We'd planned for those golden years together, traveling, spoiling grandchildren, enjoying the fruits of our hard work. Instead, I was alone, navigating betrayal by the very people we'd raised together. "I miss you," I whispered, as if he could hear me. "I could use your strength right now." But as I sat there, I realized I didn't need to borrow strength from James's memory. I had my own. I always had. The day of the meeting arrived crisp and clear. I dressed carefully in a navy suit I'd purchased in Barbados, professional but confident. I wore the pearl earrings James had given me on our 30th anniversary and applied my makeup with precision. Richard met me in the lobby of his office building. "They're all here," he said, along with Daniel's attorney. "Of course he brought reinforcements," I replied. "Is everything set up as I requested?" Richard nodded. "Recording equipment is running. The forensic accountant has all the documentation ready. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this?" I thought about the years I'd spent enabling my children's worst tendencies, making excuses for their behavior, cleaning up their messes. The way they'd repaid that love with deceit and manipulation. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. When I walked into the conference room, 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. Daniel, impeccably dressed as always, his expression carefully neutral. Sophia, wearing dark sunglasses indoors, presumably to hide tears or lack of sleep. And Marcus, pale and drawn, unable to meet my gaze. There was a 4th person, a silver-haired man I didn't recognize, seated beside Daniel. His attorney, no doubt. "Thank you all for coming," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "We didn't have much choice," Daniel replied coldly. "Your lawyer made it clear this meeting was non-negotiable." I smiled. "That's right. Today we're going to have a conversation about choices and consequences. And for once, I'll be the one setting the terms." The conference room felt too small for the emotions filling it. Daniel's attorney introduced himself as Harrison Wells, a name I recognized from society pages, known for representing wealthy clients in messy family disputes. "Mrs. Harrington," he began with practiced condescension, "my client has serious concerns about your recent behavior and mental state." "I'm sure he does," I replied calmly, "especially now that his plans have been disrupted." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, this isn't about plans. It's about your erratic decisions. Selling the family home without discussion, flying off to Barbados alone, making financial choices without your permission, you mean?" I interrupted. Let's not waste time," I said. "We're here to discuss the evidence my team has gathered regarding your activities." Richard nodded to the forensic accountant, who distributed folders to everyone at the table. "These documents detail unauthorized financial activities affecting Mrs. Harrington's accounts and the Harrington Family Foundation." The room fell silent as they flipped through the pages. Sophia's hand trembled visibly. Marcus stared at the table. Daniel maintained his poker face, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "This is absurd," Daniel finally said, pushing the folder away. "Circumstantial at best." "Actually," said Richard, "it's quite definitive. Bank records, IP addresses, email correspondence. Mrs. Harrington could pursue criminal charges against all 3 of you. Fraud, theft, conspiracy." Harrison Wells straightened. "These are serious allegations that we categorically deny. My client, your client," I cut in, "promised land he doesn't own to Westbrook Properties in exchange for a position with their company once I was out of the picture. Would you like me to play the recording of that conversation?" Daniel's face drained of color. "And Sophia," I continued, turning to my daughter, "your text messages discussing how to adjust my medication to make me more compliant could be considered attempted elder abuse." She removed her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes. "That's not what I meant. I was worried about your anxiety after Dad died." "Save it," I said softly. "I've heard enough lies." Marcus hadn't spoken a word, his gaze fixed on the damning evidence before him. "You have a choice to make," I told them. "All of you." I laid out my terms clearly. Marcus would enter treatment for gambling addiction, make full restitution, and perform community service. Daniel would resign from the board of the Family Foundation and cease all contact with Westbrook Properties. Sophia would undergo financial counseling and find legitimate employment. All 3 would sign legally binding agreements that included stipulations about their future behavior toward me and management of their own affairs. "And if we refuse?" Daniel asked, his attorney whispering urgently beside him. "Then we proceed with criminal charges," Richard answered. "The district attorney is particularly interested in the foundation fraud. That's federal wire fraud, money laundering, serious felonies." Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "Mom, please. My kids, my grandchildren. 3 beautiful children who deserved better than a father in prison. That's entirely up to you," I said. "I'm offering a path forward that doesn't involve criminal records or public scandal. Whether you take it is your decision." Daniel scoffed. "And what about our inheritance? Is that completely gone now?" I studied my eldest son, wondering how money had become more important to him than our relationship. "My new will stipulates that if you comply with all conditions for 5 consecutive years, you'll receive a modest inheritance, not equal shares of everything as before, but enough to help with retirement." "5 years?" Sophia exclaimed. "That's ridiculous." "Consider it probation," I replied. "Prove to me that you've changed and you'll be rewarded accordingly." Harrison whispered something to Daniel, who frowned but nodded. "We need time to consider these terms," Daniel said. "You have 48 hours, Richard replied. "After that, we proceed with legal action." As they gathered their things to leave, I remained seated, One more thing, I said, causing them to pause. Regardless of what you decide, I will not be manipulated, controlled, or deceived by any of you ever again. That chapter of our relationship is permanently closed. For 3 days after the meeting, I heard nothing. I packed my belongings, prepared to return to Barbados, and tried not to think about the possibility that I might never see my children again. On the third morning, as I was checking out of the hotel, Richard called. "They've all agreed to the terms," he said, sounding slightly surprised. Marcus first, then Sophia, and finally Daniel, though he was resistant until the end. Something like relief washed over me. Not happiness, exactly. The damage was too deep for that, but perhaps a slender hope that something might be salvaged from the wreckage of our family. "Have the paper sent to me in Barbados," I instructed. "I'll sign everything there." On my final evening in the States, a text came from Marcus. "I'm starting treatment tomorrow. I'm sorry for everything, Mom. I'll make this right somehow." I didn't reply. Words were easy. Actions would tell the true story. 6 months later, I was sitting on the veranda of my Barbados villa, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. My new life had taken shape around me. Morning swims in the ocean, volunteer work at a local literacy center, dinners with Irene and new friends I'd made. Richard sent regular updates on my children's compliance with our agreement. Marcus was progressing well in treatment and had secured an honest job. Sophia had found work at an art gallery and was attending financial counseling. Daniel, predictably, was doing the minimum required, but technically adhering to the terms. I had expected to feel lonely in this new life, but instead found a surprising contentment. Without the constant drain of my children's demands and manipulations, I had energy for new interests and genuine friendships. The sound of an incoming video call interrupted my thoughts. It was Grace, Marcus's 15-year-old daughter. Of all my grandchildren, she alone had reached out after everything happened. "Grandma," she said when I answered, her bright face filling the screen. "Guess what? I got accepted to that summer program in marine biology." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I replied, genuinely pleased. "Your hard work paid off." She chatted excitedly about the program, then hesitated. "Dad's doing better, you know. He's actually coming to my science presentations now. And he talks about you." "Does he?" I kept my tone neutral. "He says you taught him the hardest lesson he ever learned." She paused. "He misses you. We all do." I felt a familiar tug of emotion. Love for this bright girl, cautious hope for her father, the complicated grief of family bonds damaged but not completely severed. "Perhaps you could visit this summer," I suggested. "The coral reefs here would be perfect for a budding marine biologist." Her face lit up. "Really? That would be amazing." After we said goodbye, I sat watching the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon. The path forward with my children would be neither simple nor guaranteed. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, could never be fully restored to its original state. But perhaps something new could emerge. Relationships based on earned respect rather than obligation, with clear boundaries and honest communication. I thought of the dinner where this all began, when Daniel asked if I'd considered moving to a nursing home. How I'd nodded, already planning my escape. How I'd flown first class to Barbados and sold the house while they were still plotting. They had underestimated me then. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The evening breeze carried the scent of frangipani from my garden. In the distance, I could hear music from a nearby restaurant, laughter drifting on the wind. My new neighbors had invited me to join them for dinner later. I would go. I would enjoy myself. I would continue building this new life I had claimed for myself, and if my children eventually earned their way back into that life, they would find a mother who was stronger, wiser, and unwilling to sacrifice her dignity for their comfort ever again. The Last Supper with my children had ended one chapter of my life, but I was the one writing the next.